The sea was calm, the sun just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the endless expanse of blue. About 135 miles off the coast, a lone fishing boat sliced through the gentle waves. Its crew focused on their routine, hauling nets, checking gear, and scanning the waters for signs of a good catch. Everything was ordinary until something unusual caught one fisherman's eye. At first, it appeared to be debris, perhaps driftwood or an old buoy, bobbing on the water. But as they drew closer, their disbelief grew. This was no piece of trash. It was alive. Floating and paddling desperately against the pull of the ocean was a German shepherd dog, its ears slicked back, eyes wide with exhaustion and fear. There was a moment of stunned silence on the boat. How could a dog be out here, this far from land? The mind struggled to make sense of it. A powerful, trained breed like the German shepherd, known for their loyalty and strength, now seen struggling for survival in a place no one would ever expect. The fisherman quickly snapped out of his shock and shouted to the others. Without hesitation, they cut the engine and turned the vessel toward the animal. Time was crucial. The dog looked weak, barely managing to stay afloat. Each movement through the water seemed more labored than the last. As the boat edged closer, the crew noticed how battered the animal looked. Its coat was soaked and matted with salt water, its limbs shaking, yet its spirit was somehow intact. The fisherman reached for a net, trying to gently guide the dog towards safety. But the dog, likely frightened and disoriented, kept drifting away. It didn't know if the humans approaching were friends or threats. The crew called out in soothing voices, trying to calm the animal, slowly earning its trust with every passing second. Finally, with one final burst of strength, the dog allowed itself to be pulled on board. It collapsed on the deck, panting heavily, eyes flickering with a mix of confusion and relief. The men wrapped it in a towel, offered water, and tried to keep it warm. Everyone aboard was quiet, not because they didn't care, but because they were all thinking the same thing. How in the world did this dog end up 135 miles offshore, alone in the middle of the ocean? What journey had it endured? What storm had it survived? And what was it trying to get back to? They didn't know it yet, but this dog's presence wasn't just a strange occurrence. It was the start of a truly incredible story. A mystery was beginning to unfold before them, and none of them had any idea just how extraordinary the truth behind this lone swimmer would turn out to be. The cold waves rolled relentlessly, their rhythm unbroken by the fragile struggle of a lone creature clinging to life. The dog, though utterly exhausted, refused to surrender to the vastness of the sea. Every stroke of its legs was a defiant act of survival against impossible odds. The fishermen, now fully aware of the urgency, acted swiftly. One of them grabbed a rescue net, leaning dangerously over the side of the boat, trying to reach the animal. But the dog, likely traumatized and uncertain of these strangers, instinctively paddled away, fear flashing in its tired eyes. It didn't know these men were there to save it. To the dog, the approaching vessel may have seemed like just another threat in a world that had already turned hostile. The crew didn't give up. They understood the fear. They slowed the boat, spoke softly, one of them crouching at the edge, gently calling out, coaxing the frightened dog closer. It was a delicate balance between urgency and patience. Every second in the frigid water could mean the difference between life and death. Slowly, the dog's movements began to slow, not from trust, but from sheer fatigue. Its strength was fading fast. One of the fishermen reached out again, this time not with a net but with his bare hands, stretching just far enough to grab hold of the dog's soaked fur. With a collective effort, the crew pulled the animal onto the deck. It didn't resist. It couldn't. The moment its paws touched solid ground, the dog collapsed, trembling, ribs heaving with labored breaths. The fishermen immediately wrapped it in whatever they could find: an old wool blanket, towels, anything to help it retain warmth. Someone gently poured fresh water into a bowl and placed it near the dog's muzzle. It sniffed, then drank slowly, cautiously, each sip a lifeline. There was a quiet reverence among the men as they watched this battered creature lying before them. No one spoke for a moment. They could see the toll the ocean had taken, the salt crusted around its eyes, the rawness of its pads, the way its muscles twitched involuntarily. But what struck them most wasn't just the physical state of the dog. It was its eyes. Deep brown, glistening even through the exhaustion, holding a gaze that spoke volumes. There was pain, yes, but also a strange calm, a kind of gratitude that no words could capture. It was as if the dog understood that it had been saved, and more than that, it seemed to carry a story, something unfinished, something important. At that moment, none of the fishermen knew where the dog had come from, or how it had managed to survive such an ordeal. But they all felt it in their gut. This wasn't just a stray that had lost its way. This dog had a purpose. It had fought too hard, come too far, and survived too much. Without saying it aloud, each man on that boat realized they hadn't just rescued a dog. They had brought aboard a survivor, a fighter, and maybe, just maybe, a hero. When the fishing boat finally returned to shore, the crew handed the exhausted dog over to the local animal rescue authorities. As part of standard procedure, the veterinary team immediately scanned the dog for a microchip, not expecting much. Stray animals found at sea were usually unclaimed, lost in storms, or abandoned. But the moment the scanner beeped and displayed registered data, everyone in the room froze. The dog had an identity. Not just a name, but a classified registration code tied directly to a military database. Within minutes, a call was made to a naval command center. The tone shifted from routine to serious. Officials arrived swiftly, asking specific questions, their uniforms stark against the sterile walls of the clinic. They referred to the dog by name, Shadow, and slowly the unbelievable truth began to emerge. Shadow wasn't a stray, nor was he an ordinary pet. He was a highly trained Special Operations K-9, part of an elite Navy K-9 unit. Designed for high-risk missions, Shadow had undergone years of conditioning to work in reconnaissance, search and rescue, and even counter-terrorism scenarios. He was known for his intelligence, loyalty, and unshakable courage. Months earlier, Shadow had been deployed with a Navy team on a covert maritime operation somewhere in classified waters. During the course of the mission, an unexpected explosion rocked the vessel, throwing several members overboard, including Shadow. In the chaos and confusion, with rough seas and low visibility, Shadow was believed to have perished. Search efforts were conducted for hours, even days, but no sign of the dog was found. With heavy hearts, the unit had declared him lost at sea. But Shadow hadn't given up. Somehow, against every logical expectation, he had survived the blast, kept himself afloat, and begun the unimaginable journey, swimming mile after mile through the unforgiving ocean. For days he endured, navigating treacherous currents, evading predators, battling exhaustion, and resisting the cold that could have easily claimed his life. He had no food, no direction, only instinct and an indomitable will to live. The idea that he had swum over 135 miles in open water was almost impossible to grasp, and yet there he was, alive. His physical condition, though weak, proved he hadn't just drifted with the tide. He had powered through it. Shadow had quite literally swum his way back from the edge of death. The revelation stunned everyone. For the fishermen, it transformed their rescue from an act of compassion to a brush with heroism. For the Navy, it was the return of a soldier they had mourned. But beyond the facts, beyond the headlines and protocols, there was something even more profound. The realization that loyalty and resilience weren't just human traits. Shadow, against every odd and with no help, had survived where most would have surrendered. The dog, found swimming alone in the vast blue nowhere, was not a victim of tragedy. He was a warrior, one who had refused to die. Shadow was returned to his unit with full honors, where every soldier welcomed him not just as a teammate, but as a hero. The moment he stepped onto the base, there were no dry eyes. Grown men, hardened by years of service, were visibly moved. His courage, unwavering loyalty, and miraculous survival became a symbol of strength that went beyond species or rank. Shadow reminded the world that bravery doesn't always wear a uniform or speak in words. Sometimes it swims alone through the darkest waters. Today, he is not just remembered as a dog, but as a living legend of resilience,